Fashions may change, but glamour, it's said, never goes out of style. A new exhibition in Melbourne is taking a look back at a time when Australian fashion was recovering from the austerity imposed by the Second World War, and Australians were rediscovering the pleasures of dressing up to the nines. Dateline's best-dressed reporter Hamish Fitzsimmons has a story.
It was a time when looking your best was important and nights out really mattered.
People dressed then, they weren't all in jeans as perhaps they are now. It was a different world, and we enjoyed it enormously.
This exhibition at Melbourne's historic Como House looks at the emerging high fashion world in Australia through the clothes and the stories of some of the women who modelled them.
In those days, glamour was very important. All the models had to be glamorous. You just couldn't be just plain Jane.
The photos and gowns tell the story of a growing industry, which at the time included a young photographer named Helmut Newton. Those who were there describe it as a time when people were learning to have fun again and were embracing fashion.
After the war, there was very little fashion around, and we'd had rationing and people wore simple, practical clothes, and it was only when the war ended and gradually life improved that some beautiful clothes came out from Europe, and materials were available for designers.
The National Trust of Australia is staging the exhibition to highlight an important time in Australia's and Melbourne's history.
In the early 50s, you had Australia was looking to Europe, and couturiers from Europe were bringing their collections to Australia. Then we had an influx of magazines, and where designers were absorbing all this culture from Europe and developing their own designs.
And this is one of the photos.
Coral Knowles was asked to model clothes for the Wool Board after being spotted in a department store as a teenager. She says the quality of those creations sets them apart.
They're almost like an architectural piece rather than just a piece of clothing, as you can see, because they've lasted the test of time. I mean, they probably could all be worn right now.
But Australian fashion was turned on its head in 1965 when English model Jean Shrimpton caused outrage at the Melbourne Cup, which she famously attended without gloves or a hat, and wearing what was at the time a scandalously short skirt.
Many of the fashion leaders in Melbourne are still fuming.
I was most disappointed indeed.
I think she should have worn a hat?
Oh, most definitely.
From that moment, you suddenly let in the swinging 60s, and there's just this sea change, this sort of renaissance of where people are suddenly casual and exploring new ideas in fashion.
And as for fashion now, there's a feeling that some of the glitz is missing.
High fashion then was high fashion. I think now the high fashion has gone, the high has gone out of the high fashion. I think it's, they were so glamorous, the look was so glamorous, whereas now it's not that glamorous as it was then.
Hamish Fitzsimmons, Late Line.